And welcome back to deck building. I am your host, Demo, and this is the 20 most underrated commanders in the entire format. Just trying to shine some light on some underrated commanders in the format. Of course, I do this all the time. I'm doing it since the start of my channel in various ways, whether it be through building actual decks or my Underwhelming Commander series, or just talking about how shocked I am that some of these commanders are so unpopular. This is sort of the penultimate list here. I went back, looked at all my older videos. I even asked my patrons on their opinion, what they think are commanders that deserve a little bit more love. Some of these are newer, they aren't just old commanders. A lot of them are. Most of these are older commanders. There are a couple newer ones as well that I'm shocked don't see more play. I'm going to start off with a commander of mine, Abashon Cephalid Emperor. And I made this commander because of Verity Circle. I was looking to make a mono blue deck, and I was trying to build a mono blue deck that wasn't just, I counter all your stuff. A lot of mono blue decks just get hated out because people assume you have a ton of counter spells. I think I have 3 in that deck. And I wanted a commander that, when people saw it, they didn't think this guy's going to counter all my stuff. Again, as I say all the time, rule number 1 is don't make yourself a target, and having Abashon in the command zone is great that way. Verity Circle had just come out, and I was like, okay, well, there's a payoff for what my commander is doing, right? Because, of course, you can tap an untapped octopus you control to tap target permanent. That's right. It's not Cephalid anymore, sadly. But the big ability here, and the one that I realized is super powerful, even without a Verity Circle or anything else. Blue, 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 tap all creatures without flying. And that's a really great ability. Really great ability. You look at this commander and you think, again, I guess this commander has gotten better because they switched Cephalid to Octopus. So now you can do Octopus Tribal. Okay, whatever. But mostly the ability that I use is just tapping everyone's creatures down, which of course, again, this commander's gotten better because of the added tapping theme support. There are a few really neat cards like Lost in the Maze that do fit in that deck, sure. But this ability, I think, is super underrated because what it essentially does is just make your creatures unblockable, right? What I typically do with my deck is I just activate that ability right before my turn. So I pay 3 blue, tap everyone's creatures, and then untap on my turn, and now I'm the only one with untapped creatures, right? There's a lot you can do with that. The big one is getting in for damage. So if you just have a deck where, just get away from the Cephalid or Octopus Tribal and think about, I want to get in for combat damage. This is a great commander for that, in my opinion. Only 326 decks on EDH Rec currently, which is essentially nothing. Rank 1637, right? So I'm going to be giving you guys numbers as we go here, just to give some concrete metrics on how unpopular these commanders are. Moving along, Shale, Dean of Radiance, which is, I've mentioned this before. It's one of the most underrated commanders in the entire format. I think it's fantastic. It's an absolute shocker for me that this guy isn't played more. Only 188 decks, an EDH Rec. 188 is nothing. That's a commander you're just never going to see unless you actually have it yourself. And it's ranked 1931 in the format. 19. I mean, all you have to do is look at how many commanders do we have in the format, right? Out of all the commanders we have in the format, it's ranked 1900, so it's way down there. Now, of course, one of the things that make this commander good is it has a front and a backside, so you can use the front, which is Shale, Dean of Radiance, 1 and a white, Bird Cleric, 1/1, Flying Vigilance, tap, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature, then enter the battlefield under your controller's turn. And I will just point out, just the front. I could do Bird Tribal and Cleric Tribal in black and white colors. That's pretty interesting. Obviously Cleric is great in black and white colors. If you want to do a Cleric Tribal deck, with a more underwhelming, not so obvious commander, which is a great strategy to have, this is a good one. Puts counters on your creatures. There's some neat things you can do there. If you ever want to do black and white Bird Tribal, this is a commander that can do that. However, I think the back is way, way better. Embrose, Dean of Shadows, 2 black, black. Human Warlock, 4/4. Tap, put a +1 counter on another target creature. Then Embrose, Dean of Shadows deals 2 damage to that creature, so you can actually use that ability to kill your opponent's creatures if it's a 1/1. Or if it has a 1 toughness, your commander just kills your opponent's creatures. That is definitely a build-aroundable ability, but you can also put it on your own creatures. And if that creature, again, has a greater than 1 toughness, it will get the counter and then take the damage and not die. However, you can still kill your creatures if you want to, because whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, draw a card. I mean, there's so much you can do there. You can throw their enrage mechanic in here, guys, if you want to, because your commander is dealing damage to your own creatures. Stuffy doll effects if you want to. There's so much stuff you can do here. You're putting counters on creatures. You can put them on your opponent's creatures if you want. You can put them on yours. You can deal damage to your creatures. You can kill your opponent's creatures. Whenever your creatures die with counters on them, you get to draw cards. That's a fantastic thing to have on your commander. I can't believe how unpopular this guy is. One of the most shocking ones ever for me. Kogla the Titan Ape, another fantastic build around in my opinion, and another commander that I've always been shocked how unpopular it is. 439 decks, not bad. It certainly is more popular than Shale and Embrose, but still rank 1481. Not great. 3 green, green, green. Ape 7/6. When it enters the battlefield, it fights up to one target creature you don't control. So you're doing the fighting thing, pretty great. When Kogla attacks, destroy target artifact or enchantment defending player controls. So your commander is creature removal and artifact removal and enchantment removal stapled into one. That's just in itself fantastic in my opinion. But also you can pay 1 and a green, return target human you control to owner's hand. Kogla gains indestructible in a turn. So you can make your commander indestructible, and then on top of that, you can get into some shenanigans. Like if I was building this deck, I would just put a whole bunch of humans in the deck. And more so, humans in the deck that I want to return to my hand like an Eternal Witness. So I return that to my hand, make my commander indestructible, survives the board wipe, then I can repay my Eternal Witness and get something out of my graveyard, right? You could actually do, funny enough, human tribal. That's a really funny way to go with Kogla. Have Kogla as your commander, but just do human tribal in green. Because of course, at any point, you can just use your commander's ability to bounce a human to hand, and you can have your commander just be creature removal and artifact and enchantment removal. I think it's a great commander. An Aim Death Aspect is another commander that I have mentioned on my channel before. I believe I actually made a deck with this on my Underwhelming Commander series. This is another commander that, in my opinion, has gotten a lot better for a multitude of reasons. For black, spirit 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for any number of spirit cards and put them into your graveyard and then shuffle. So as I say all the time, whenever a commander says any number on it, or whenever any card says do this any number of times or search for any number, it's like, okay, the potential here is huge. And of course, the potential here is definitely huge. This commander's gotten better because there's just more spirits, there's more changeling stuff, there's more tribal stuff. Just being able to search your library in general obviously is great in the commander format. What can you do here? I think the possibilities are endless. You can go check out the deck that I did on my channel. I combined a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, Mortal Kombat. There, I just win the game. I just have a Mortal Kombat in play, and then I cast my commander. It doesn't matter what I'm putting in my graveyard, just a bunch of spirits, throw them in my graveyard, and then on my upkeep, I win because I have enough creatures in play. Right. Currently only 524 decks on EDHREC, which again, it's essentially nothing. Rank 1384 in the format. Another one of those commanders I'm sure most of you guys have never even seen before. A lot of neat things you can do with that ability of just putting any number of things in your graveyard. Cids Hand is another one that I've always been shocked how unpopular it is. This one's even less popular than an Aim Death Aspect. 399 decks on EDHREC. Rank 1546. I've always been shocked by this one because I think there's so much you can do here. So 3 blue and a black, human wizard 3/4, skip your draw step. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. And you can play a black, tap, exile X cards from your graveyard. Target creature gets -X in blend a turn. So we have removal stapled in our commander. Pretty great. I guess the skip your draw step part sort of shies people away from this. I'll just throw out a few ideas. Your commander is an upkeep trigger. I mean, already that is, look at the top 3 cards and put one in your hand. That's amazing, right? The rest go into your graveyard, which is also amazing. So building around that is super easy. Throw a Paradox Haze in this deck or anything that gives you an extra upkeep. There's actually a few of those options. So again, this is another commander that's gotten better for that reason. You get 2 triggers off your commander. I get to look at the top 3 cards, put 1 in my hand, 2 in my graveyard, then do that again with a Paradox Haze. Anything that gives you a extra beginning phase. There's a couple of those now, right? So I'm just digging so far into my deck to get stuff. Skipping your draw step actually can be, you can work around that. So it's an upside as well. And then obviously you're exiling cards from your graveyard, which there's a lot you can do with that. We have a lot of effects now that are benefiting you from having stuff leave your graveyard. That's another thing. So regardless of what you're doing in this deck, there's already like a dozen cards you can throw in here that just work with what your commander's doing. Then the rest of the deck is just whatever you want. The rest of the deck is some graveyard strategy. I'm throwing stuff into my graveyard, whatever the case may be, right? There's just so many directions you can go with this guy, and just everything that he's doing on his own is already pretty good. Ulasht the Hate Seed. 2 red, green, Hellion Hydra, 00, when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each other red creature you control and a +1 counter for each other green creature you control. You can pay 1, remove a +1 counter from it to have it deal 1 damage to target creature or create a 1/1 Sapling creature token. You know, I used to see this a lot more. It's one of those commanders that has lost a lot of popularity. That's why I'm giving it a mention here. It is maybe gotten a little buried by the better Hydra commanders, because I think a lot of people might have done Hydra tribal with this. Maybe you could do Hellion tribal with it. It's just got such a neat combination of abilities here. And the +1/+1 counter, obviously we got a ton of support with that recently. So again, a lot of these commanders have gotten better. So I guess I could be including them and these commanders have gotten better because of the stuff we've gotten recently, those videos. I think this is just an underrated commander all around. I like that it's the modal ability of I can throw damage around, and of course, very easy to put Death Touch on your commander and just start killing all your opponent's creatures. And Sapling tokens, so I can do a little bit of Sapling tribal here as well. There's a lot of directions to go with this. I think just a really neat commander. Only 433 decks, rank 1490. I think it deserves a little bit more love in the format. Like I said, I asked my patrons, and I have a couple patron suggestions here. One of them is Mikaeus the Lunarch. X and a white human cleric 0/0 enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. Tap, put a +1 counter on Mikaeus, or tap and remove a counter from it to put a counter on each other creature you control. This is another commander I used to see quite often back in the day, and I never see anymore, so it fits into that category. Only currently 321 decks on EDH Rec. And any commander that's under 1,000 decks is one that you're probably never ever going to see. This is a commander, I think it gets played in the 99 of a lot of decks. It's obviously got a fantastic ability. It's been reprinted in quite a few commander sets for, I guess, probably the reason that it used to be a kind of popular-ish commander, but also it just fits in the 99 of a lot of decks. There's just so many neat things you can do here. Again, the +1/+1 counter theme. Your commander has a tap ability, so any untappers will be great here so that you can use the ability over again. There has been a lot more stuff like that in recent times. A lot more just I put counters on my creatures, right? Putting counters on your creatures, removing counters from your creatures, all of that has a lot of support now. So this is a commander that, again, has, in my opinion, just gotten a lot better. There's a lot more creatures that just want counters put on them, like a Dusk Legion Duelist. You know, obviously that's going to be a slam dunk in the deck. So this is a commander that maybe has fallen off because it's a tad boring, but because we have so many more interesting directions we can go with it now, instead of just I'm making my creatures bigger, maybe you want to give this another look. Seke Season's Guide, really unique commander. And again, this is another one I did on my channel. I actually did this one in my real-time deck building video. If you've never seen that, pretty old video now, I guess. This is the one that I did a poll. It was for my Underwhelming Commander series, but I decided to do a real-time deck building video just to build a deck in real time. And this is the one that won the poll, so I ended up doing it on that video. And I came up with some interesting ideas, but I actually missed a bunch because there is so much going on with this commander. This is another commander that it's like, okay, it's doing this one thing, but no, it's actually doing a ton, and there's a bunch you can build around here. So 5 green, Spirit 0/0, and yes, I know it's expensive, but you are in green, keep that in mind. Also, pretty amazing art on this card, in my opinion. Enters the battlefield with 8 +1/+1 counters on it, and of course, because we're doing the +1/+1 counter theme, you can very easily have this guy enter with double the amount of counters on it or whatever, right? There's tons of effects like that now. If damage would be dealt to Seke, prevent that damage and remove that many +1/+1 counters from it and create that many 1/1 colorless spirit creature tokens. So already we can see how a doubling season is bonkers in this deck, because not only are we doubling counters, but we're also doubling the tokens we are making. And you can very easily get into some pretty serious shenanigans here. This is a replacement effect. Your commander will never be taking damage. That is important to note as well. Because you are doubling counters here, you can get into a very simple scenario where your commander never goes away, right? You just keep cranking out tokens over and over and over again and keep replacing the counters on your commander. Also, though, we have sacrifice 8 spirits to return Seke from your graveyard to play. So what you can also do is, because you're making all those tokens, once your commander dies, you can just very easily get it back. And I mean, you have to do damage to it. So you get into a scenario where your opponents are just never going to be able to get rid of your commander. I guess they can try to exile it, but you're going to have sack outlets in the deck. You'd be silly not to, right? The other really funny thing you can do here is any Anthem effect will make it so that you can, again, get into some really funny shenanigans. All your commander is doing is removing counters from itself. It doesn't matter what his power and toughness is, right? If you have just any old Anthem that gives your commander a +1/+1, of course, it won't die when all the counters are removed. So what ends up happening is, if damage would be dealt to it, you prevent the damage. Okay, so we've prevented the damage, remove that many +1/+1 counters from Seki. Okay, well, there is none. We've removed them all. It's just an 0/0 that is still sticking around because of an Anthem effect. So it's a 1/1. So we don't remove any counters, but we are still creating that many 1/1 colorless spirit creature tokens, right? So those are all separate effects. The prevent damage, the removing counters, and the creating of those spirits all are separate. They don't rely on each other at all. So with an Anthem effect in play, you can just have your commander constantly, let's say, block and be spitting out tokens every single turn, which is pretty darn neat, right? There's some really neat things you can do with this commander. It's super underrated in my opinion. Grazilaxx Illithid Scholar, another patron suggestion. And this is one that, again, it falls into the category of, when I first saw it, I'm like, oh, well, there's a ton you can do there. A lot of neat things you can do. Ninja Tribal is the deck that I originally made, because that's the first thing I thought that worked with both abilities on this commander. And I made a Ninja Tribal deck. And that, again, that's probably a better option now, because of course we have more ninjas in mono blue, but this is actually a really powerful commander. I have a patron with this deck, and man, he stomps us pretty hard every single time. So 1 blue, horror 3/2, and again, maybe a little bit of more horror tribal we could throw in here. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may return it to owner's hand. That's great. And whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card, which is also great. And I know the one or more part might, shy people away a little bit, but if you attack 3 different opponents, you will draw 3 cards. So drawing 3 cards every single turn is pretty fantastic. If your creatures get blocked, you can bounce them to hand. That's why it works great with ninjutsu, of course. Just putting creatures in here that are impossible to block. Flying creatures, essentially an Edric deck with the evasion creatures that can't be blocked or have flying or whatever. You don't get the green, but also you're not letting your opponents draw cards because only you're benefiting off of this. So in my opinion, it's very equal to an Edric and what it's doing. Again, when I play against my patron, it's like, okay, we got to 3v1 this guy because he's drawing so many cards and it's so hard to slow him down. Only 465 decks in EDH rec. This has always been a shocker for me how unpopular this guy is. Ranked 1457 on the format. Having that much potential for card draw on your commander, that alone is pretty fantastic. Kazuul, Tyrant of the Cliffs. 3 red, Ogre Warrior 5/4. Whenever a creature an opponent controls attacks, if you're the defending player, create a 3/3 red Ogre creature token. Unless that creature's controller pays 3. What a great commander. And one of the things I love about this commander so much is it's just so unique in mono red, right? It's kind of like a pillow fort a little bit commander in mono red. Getting away from that, I think this is just a great commander. And the really funny part is you're in mono red and you don't want to be attacked, or people don't want to attack you. That pillow fort strategy in mono red, I think, is what makes this so unique. But of course you can force attacks, and that's where things get really interesting. If you put in a card like Fumiko the Lowblood, okay, well, creatures your opponents control have to attack each combat of Fable. Oh, they can attack you or they can attack your opponents. So you're doing the goad thing without it being as obnoxious, right? So you're making it so that your opponents still have the option to attack you if they want to. Go ahead, attack me. Better leave a lot of mana open, or you're going to give me a whole bunch of Ogre tokens, which of course will eventually be your win con. You could also throw like a Warstorm Surgeon here, where now every time you make those tokens, you're throwing damage around. The commander on its own is fantastic. There's another commander that has gone in the 99 of a ton of decks, I imagine. But on top of that, now I can start figuring out other things to do with those Ogres, where I can throw damage around, maybe sacrifice them with some effect. There's lots of things you can do there. Obviously, it can also be your win con. 472 decks in EDH rec. Again, we're in the, you probably don't see this commander ever territory. Rank 1441. This commander is pretty great, I think, and a lot of very open-ended. A lot of things you can do with it. I like it a lot. Storev, Devkrin, Leech, 1 black, and a green zombie elf wizard 5/4. And again, I will just point out we have a zombie and an elf and a wizard. Those are maybe three of the most popular creature types in the entire format. And yes, there is a lot you can do there. Has trample whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, return to your hand the target creature or planeswalker card in your graveyard that wasn't put there this combat. And I think the weird wording of that ability is what shies people away from this commander. 193 decks only on EDH Rec. Again, this is one of the most unpopular ones on this list. 1918. Like, just nobody is playing this at all. I get it's a Golgari commander that is, doing the graveyard thing, and there's so many better options. Like, why not just play Marin? Well, again, Marin is a target in the command zone. That's why not play Marin, right? This is, and if you find you have a Marin deck that is just hated and everyone's going after you and all that, this is a commander that is going to be certainly less of a target. Most people don't even know it exists. And also, it is a commander that I would say is more resistant to graveyard hate. You know, if I Bajuka Bog the Marin guy, he's going to be in big trouble. If I have anything in play, and this is a big difference between Marin and this guy, is anything that hoses dies triggers, right? Anything that says whenever a creature your opponent controls dies, you exile it. There's obviously a bunch of effects like that. Storev can get around that. That's going to hose a Marin deck pretty badly. Storev can get around that. And the reason why, and I will explain this ability a little better so that people understand. The only thing you can't get is a creature that went to your graveyard during combat this turn. That's all you can't get. Or a Planeswalker, I guess. So I guess a funny way to go here is Planeswalker Tribal. You can, ultimate your Planeswalker on the first main phase, have it go to your graveyard, attack with your commander, and of course it's super easy to get in for damage. It's a 5/4 with trample, but again, getting back to the zombie and elf thing, you can put in there a Zombie Master, which will give it Swamp Walk, make it harder to block, or you can put in, anything that gives your elves Forest Walk, which of course there's ways to do that as well. So getting in for damage is almost a guarantee here, I think, as long as you build this deck properly. And then I ultimate my Planeswalker on the first main phase. When this guy gets in for damage, I return to my hand a Planeswalker from my graveyard that wasn't put there this combat. It wasn't put there in combat, it was put there in my first main phase, right? So basically any creature that's dying in combat you can't get back, but you don't care about any of that, right? This is another deck where an Oracle Lore Mage is an absolute slam dunk. It just becomes tap, tutor for a creature, and put it into my hand. How good is that? The only stipulation is it wasn't put there this combat. Just any creature or planeswalker that wasn't put there this combat. So it could have been put there 5 turns ago and you can get it back, right? I could have just tutored for it with my Oracle Lore Mage and get it back. And again, you can do the planeswalker thing there as well. Any creature or planeswalker going to your graveyard through any means, as long as it wasn't this specific combat, you can get back with your commander. There's so much you can do there, I think. Moving along, Danny Pink is the, I think, newest commander on this list. And this is one, again, my patrons just threw that suggestion out and I was like, I couldn't believe how unpopular it is because this guy is just, there's so much you can do here. 3 in a blue, Human Soldier Advisor, 4/3 with Mentor. We don't care so much about the mentor ability because this ability you're building around is so fantastic. Creatures you control have, whenever one or more counters are put on this creature, for the first time each turn, draw a card. What? That's amazing. And I'll just throw out one really super interesting idea you can do with this commander. Again, it's so open-ended. It is any kind of counter. Level counters. Let's do a level counter deck with our Danny Pink. And every time we level up, and I know there's only a few in mono blue, but that's just one thing you can do in the deck. We level up our guys, and every time we do so, we're putting a counter on them, and we are drawing a card. Any creature out there with cumulative upkeep? How many blue creatures have cumulative upkeep? Let's throw a few of those in there. Those guys are putting age counters on themselves, and whenever we pay that cumulative upkeep, we will get to draw a card. Doing it only once each turn? Okay. Even if we only do it on our turn and no one else's turn, that's good enough, isn't it? That's a ton of card draw. This is, I believe, the most unpopular guy on this entire list. It is rank 1,999. Wow, that's insanely unpopular. Only 165 decks on EDHREC. I can't even believe it. This is such an open-ended, fantastic ability. Nobody's going after this. Is it because it is a Doctor Who card? That's possible. Maybe people don't like this character. I don't know. There's all sorts of little nuances involved. But man, you can make such an interesting deck with this guy, and he is crazy unpopular. Kellen Daring Traveler, another commander that I am now playing, and this was my Dragon Lord Dromoka deck and is now my Kellen Daring Traveler deck. If you watch my video recently where I talk about all my personal decks, I will discuss in that video why. I won't go into it here. 1 in a white, legendary creature, human fairy scout, 2/3. However, it is also an adventure. Journey On is 1 green mana sorcery adventure. Create X map tokens where X is 1 plus the number of opponents who control an artifact. So you're always going to get at least 1. I find when I play this, and again, I have experience with this because I have this as a commander, I usually wait till my opponents have 1 mana rock at least. So I am 1 green mana getting 2 map tokens. That's good enough. You can get a lot more. You can get up to 4 here because it's 1 plus the number of opponents you control with an artifact. You're always going to get at least 1. You can get up to 4. Not bad. For 1 mana, not bad. And then, of course, it goes on an adventure, and you can cast the other side, the creature side, whenever it's relevant for you. And you will have a 2/3 creature that whenever it attacks, you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card with mana value 3 or less, put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put it into your graveyard. The map tokens and what your commander doing, obviously, you're doing a top deck thing here, which of course you can build around. You can use the map tokens on your commander, of course. What I did is I ended up just putting more mana value 3 creatures into my deck so that when I attacked with my commander, and it's just a value commander, that's it. It's a great commander for I'm just digging into my deck looking for stuff. And I attack with my commander, and if it happens to be a mana value 3 creature, I get to draw a card. And if it's something I don't really want, it's a land and I don't want a land, I'll just chuck it in my graveyard. It's just a way to filter through your deck. That's what makes this commander really great, I guess as a method 2 commander. This is a really fantastic method 2 commander because it just helps you dig into your deck to look for the stuff you want. Also, though, you can very much build around it, and you can do, again, very interesting Selesnya graveyard strategy because, of course, map tokens put stuff in your graveyard, your commander puts stuff in your graveyard, so that's a neat thing to do. I actually have a couple of threshold cards in this deck that my commander helps me get to the threshold, obviously, because your commander as an adventure can bounce it back to your hand and do the map token thing again, build around that a whole bunch more. Artifacts, you're creating tokens. There's so many different directions you can go here. If you really want to build around the map token thing, you can just do that almost entirely, where you do the map token thing, then cast your commander, then return your commander to hand, do the map token thing again. It's not that expensive. The map part only costs 1 and your commander only costs 2. And again, when my commander dies, I just send it back to the command zone and journey on again. I just pay the 3 mana, right? Because of course I have to pay the commander tax, but I pay the commander tax on the adventure side. So I'm only paying 3 mana, then my commander goes on an adventure again, and then I can cast it for 2 mana, right? Super inexpensive, a really great commander, I think. Patron of the Nazumi, and I think all the patrons are underrated because they have the very underrated offering ability, which is fantastic. I decided to talk about this one. I think this one is the most underrated. This is the most unpopular commander on this entire list. Actually, it's even more unpopular than Danny Pink. That's why I'm giving it a mention here. 5 black, spirit 6/6. With rat offering. And I guess, again, the tribal thing really gums things up for people where, okay, my commander's a spirit, but it has rat offering. And then also this ability has nothing to do with rats. Whenever a permanent is put in an opponent's graveyard, that player loses 1 life. Okay, but you got to get away from that. And again, whenever a permanent is put in an opponent's graveyard, that player loses 1 life is such a fantastic ability that, it's your win con. It is, you can do the whenever an opponent loses life stuff. All of that works here. This is any permanent put into opponent's graveyard. Of course, that's going to work with treasure tokens, so your opponents like to go off with their treasure tokens. This is a fantastic commander against that, but it costs 7 mana, right? Hold on now. The offering ability, like I said, is such a fantastic ability. That's why all of these, I think, deserve more attention. This one in particular. So you may cast this card anytime you can cast an instant. So you can cast this guy with flash by sacrificing a rat and paying the difference in mana cost between the two. Mana cost includes color, which is really, really relevant here. So if I have, I could just do a Relentless Rats here if I want to. Let's do a Relentless Rats deck. You don't have to. I know there's better rat tribal commanders, but I have a Relentless Rats in play. It's 1 black. So now I can sacrifice that rat, cast this at instant speed, which is important, and my commander will be reduced by 1 black. Color is included. So now my commander only costs 4 generic mana. What a massive difference that makes. A massive difference. So if I'm building this deck, I'm just putting in a bunch of rats. You don't need a ton. You just need enough. Again, I have a Patron of the Kitsune deck, so I'm speaking from experience. Guess what? There's not that many foxes in mono white. I only have a few. All I need is like 1 to get my commander out because you're reducing the cost of your commander. You're sort of cheating commander tax as well. This doesn't have to be a rat tribal deck. You just have to put a few in. This is a sneaky good ability. Again, this is an ability that, and again, if I have a Maronar in the command zone, again, we're back to that. Everyone's going to be after you. No one's going to be after you if you're doing this guy. I guarantee it. They probably never seen it before. And it's like, this guy costs 7 mana. Who cares? Then later in the game, all of a sudden, I flash out my Patron of the Nazumi and he sits in play, and my opponents, whenever they sack a treasure token or a fetch land, they're going to lose a life. And it's just that little bit of incidental damage. They're not going to really notice it at first. So there is the advantage of I get this out early and my Opponents don't really notice it's happening. It's just happening a little bit. I just give them a little reminder. Oh, you lost a life there, by the way. But if you find that you're becoming a target because of it, you can flash it out later in the game. Now everyone's life is a little bit lower, and this is just going to help you close out the game, right? And you can even get into the situation where you have one of those opponents that's going on. Again, if you have guys that like to go off, and I have a million treasure tokens, and I have a million sapling tokens, and I have just, look at how huge my board is. I have all this stuff. Okay, your buddy has a Avenger of Zendikar with 30 plant tokens. You flash out your Patron of the Nazumi and then just cast a board wipe. My opponent loses all his stuff and it ends up killing him because he has so much stuff in play. I like commanders like this because it punishes your opponents for all the stuff they're doing. That's a great strategy in the commander format, I think. This guy is rank 2196. It is literally one of the most unpopular commanders in the entire format. And I think it's a pretty darn good one. Moving along, Sapling of Kor is one of my favorite commanders. I think that I've actually done this twice on my deck doctors for my patrons, and both decks were super, super interesting. And this is just such a great commander that, again, a commander that I did see from time to time, but because of what it's doing, again, the tribal thing, people just look at this and they're like, oh, I want to be doing Treefolk Tribal, but because there's better Treefolk Tribal commanders, now nobody does Sapling of Kor anymore, but there's so many other interesting ways you don't have to do the Treefolk thing. So 3 and 2 hybrid Golgari mana, so black and green. Treefolk, Shaman. So yes, you can do some Treefolk stuff here for sure. You can also do some Shaman stuff here as well. I believe there's a little bit in these colors. It's kind of indestructible. You have an indestructible commander. That's already great. So it is a commander that you don't have to worry that much about dying. Yes, it can die, obviously, but it certainly isn't going to die as much as most other commanders. Again, everyone complaining about commanders that have Ward 2 on them. This guy's getting indestructible, for crying out loud. And I have played against my patrons where they got this out and it stuck around the entire game. They never had to cast it again. Whenever this guy attacks, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you gain life equal to its toughness, lose life equal to its power, and then put it into your hand. So I know people will look at this and go, okay, big butt tribal because I want to be gaining life. There is a couple important things to note here, okay? First of all, great card advantage. Essentially drawing a card here, although you do get around the card draw thing. That is important to note. If you want to put a Marilyn of the Morn song in this deck where nobody can draw cards, you're getting around that by looking at the top card of your library and putting it in your hand, right? Doing that motion is not actually card draw, so it gets around that. That is, it can be relevant. Top deck manipulation is something that you can do here, of course, because you're doing the, look at the top card of your library. You can do the big butt thing where you gain more life. But I will point out, if there's a 2/2 creature on top of your library, you will reveal it. You will gain 2 life, then you will lose 2 life. So, of course, your life is exactly the same, so you're not down anything, and then you put it into your hand. However, you are triggering the life gain, and Golgari is way better in life gain now. Again, back in the day, there wasn't that much support in the life gain theme. That is the direction I would go with this guy. I would go with a life gain theme because getting that life gain trigger is very easy, right? If I have a Well Lost Dreams in this deck, I can, again, I gained the 2 life. My life is the same as it was at the beginning of combat, but I have gained 2 life. My Well Lost Dream will trigger. I can pay 2 mana and draw 2 cards. That's pretty great. There is a lot of great life gain trigger stuff in Golgari colors now. So this is another commander that you might want to revisit. Only 445 decks on EDH Rec and rank 1475. Not much at all. Great card advantage, indestructible commander, the life gain, all of that. There's just so many neat things you can do with this guy. Oraki Ascendant is the most popular commander on this list. It does have 1,261 decks. So I think it's the only commander here that is over 1,000 decks, but still rank 915. There are 914 commanders, guys, in the format that are more popular than this guy. And again, another commander that I'm guessing most of the people watching this video has never even seen this commander before. This is another one that I did see from time to time back in the day, and I haven't seen it in years for sure. Any mana doubling, mana tripling effect that you've ever seen in a commander game, if you like doing that kind of stuff, pales in comparison to what this commander can do. The potential here is absolutely insane. If you haven't seen this commander in action, go watch a video of it because the possibilities here are absolutely ridiculous. I'll also point out this is a flip commander, which there's only a few of those. That alone is kind of interesting in the commander format, I think. So 1 green and a green. Legendary creature, Snake Monk 2/3. So Snake Tribal a little bit, just throw that out there in green. Of course, from Kamigawa, there was some. Really interesting unique ability here. Reveal your hand. That's the the activation cost here, right? So if at all you're worried about your commander being removed before you can do this, the activation for this ability is only just reveal your hand, right? So I reveal my hand as the activation cost for this ability. If you have 7 or more lands in your hand, flip Sasaya Oraki Ascendant. That's it. All I have to do is just have 7 or more land cards in my hand. How hard is that in green? It's not that hard, actually. And the flip side is a legendary enchantment, Sasaya's Essence. Buckle up for this ability. Whenever a land you control is tapped for mana, add 1 mana of that type to your mana pool for each other land you control with the same name. Move over Nyxbloom Ancient, okay? If you think that thing adds a lot of mana, try this on for size, okay? I'm just gonna paint the picture so you guys get, again, if you haven't actually seen this in person, nothing in the entire game of Magic, I don't think, outside of an infinite mana combo, obviously, is going to create the kind of mana that this commander can create. So I have, let's say, 5 forests in play. Right? 5 basic forests. And again, I have some in my hand. I can reveal my hand. And then after I've revealed it, I can play my land for turn. So I have, let's say, 5 forests in play. I think that's a reasonable amount. When I tap that forest for mana, it's going to add a mana for each other land I control with the same name. So each of my forests is adding 4 mana because I have 4 other forests in play. Again, step aside Nyxbloom Ancient. You ain't nothing. And again, a lot of people will say, okay, well, my commander is going to be Removal Magnet. Definitely not going to be the first time you play it because a lot of people have never seen this before. After you play this deck a couple times, that might be the case. What you can do is wait till I have the 7 lands in hand, play my commander, immediately reveal my hand to flip this over. Your opponent can respond with removal. I guess, I mean, you're really going to want protection stuff in here. And obviously in green, that's not hard to do. You, funny enough, can even regenerate your commander in response to removal, and it will regenerate and then flip over after the ability resolves. And because you have flipped over your commander, and obviously mana abilities don't use the stack, if someone again tries to remove your commander, you can just tap all your lands down in response, adding an absolute ton of mana, and then immediately just cast your commander again, and then immediately just flip it over again, right? So you can really get around removal really easily with this commander as well, which is one of the things that makes it a great commander. So if you want to do that battle cruiser magic, I know you're in mono green, but doing big, splashy, ridiculous things in a commander game, this is probably one of the best commanders for it. All right, getting towards the end here. At number 17 is Barrin Master Wizard, 1 blue, human wizard 1/1, and has a pretty simple ability, but one I actually think you can do a lot with. Pay 2 and sacrifice a permanent, return target creature to owner's hand. And I, again, have a little bit of experience with this commander because it is in my Nyambi deck. And the reason it's in my Nyambi deck is because I have a little bit of a sacrifice theme here. And why would you want to be doing that? Because there, funny enough, is quite a few things that you could be sacrificing in blue. Hatching Plans is a great one. That's an auto include in your Barrin Master Wizard deck because, of course, when it dies, you get to draw 3 cards. And, of course, you can sacrifice it with your commander. Coveted Jewel would be another one that I would throw in this deck where I can play it, draw 3 cards, use it for mana. And if at any point there's a chance that I will lose it because, of course, what is it? If someone attacks and isn't blocked, they gain control of it. In response, I just sacrifice it and bounce someone creature to owner's hand. Of course, with bouncing creatures, there's a lot you can do there. You can bounce your own creatures, actually, if you want to. If I have a creature that I want to reuse, I can bounce it to hand. You can actually return your commander to hand in response to removal, so your commander is really hard to kill. Stealing your opponent's stuff is a really easy way to go here. Just anything that gains control of your opponent's creatures or artifacts or whatever, I can gain control of them, then sacrifice them to also bounce a creature. It's a little bit of an obnoxious deck to play against. I will be honest, my patron had a Barrin Master Wizard deck again, and it's like, okay, having my stuff stolen and bounced, and but it is an underwhelming commander, and it is a super unpopular one. Only 157 decks on EDHREC. Again, we're like way down in the 2000s here, ranked 2022. Super unpopular, and there actually is some really interesting, fun things you can do here, I think, and some unique things. Again, sacrificing permanents in mono blue, it's not something you see a lot, right? All right, coming in at number 18 is one of my favorite commanders to play against of all time. That's the Medal of Honor that I'm giving to this commander. This is one of my favorite commanders that I've ever played against, and I think it's a fantastic one. Seizan, Perverter of Truth, shining a little bit of light on it here. 3 black, Demon Spirit, 6/5. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player loses 2 life and draws 2 cards. So it's kind of a huggy commander in mono black, but also your opponents are losing life. I mean, your win con is stapled on your commander. This used to be a way more popular commander before Nekusar came out. Nekusar Sorcerer, of course, is sort of stealing the spotlight here because it more so has your win con built on it, and it's also in more colors. But again, if you want to do a similar thing and not have a commander in the command zone that is a target, Seizan is the commander for you. In mono black, there's still a lot you can do here with punishing your opponents for drawing cards. Again, and that's the thing that I love about it, is I'm punishing my opponents for the things that they want to be doing already, which is obviously the theme you're going to be building around here. This has 796 decks on EDHREC. So again, it is one of the more popular ones on this list. It is rank 1150. Again, if you want to talk about one of the more popular ones on this list, but yet still incredibly unpopular, certainly is. Again, another one that people probably don't play much anymore, but I did see from time to time. I used to play against a guy regularly who had this deck, and I just love playing against it because it's fun and interesting because of they're doing something very unique, and it's interesting to play against that. But also I am getting to draw more cards, which is great. It's kind of funny to lose in a way where my opponent is letting me draw more cards, but it's also killing me. That I just find that to be a very unique strategy in the Commander format. All right, Maltani Maro Sorcerer is, I think, probably the good Voltron strategy, not very popular in the Commander format, but this might be the best, and it is certainly one of the most underrated Voltron commanders out there. If you want to be doing that strategy in mono green, maybe it's not the best colors for a Voltron strategy, but hear me out. I will make a case for this commander. So 4 green elemental. It has Shroud, which is your opponents can't target it, but you can't target it, which is one of the reasons why people shy away from it as a commander. How am I going to use this as a Voltron commander when I can't give it stuff? I can't put equipment on it or put auras on it. Hold on now, okay? I will make a case for it. It has power and toughness equal to the total number of cards in all players' hands. Holy man, so this thing's going to be massive the first time you play it. The downside here is as you go on, it will get smaller and smaller, but of course you have less opponents to deal with, so the fact that it gets smaller doesn't really matter, right? It's not going to hurt you that much. It's still going to be like a 10-10 once you have one opponent left. It's still counting the number of cards in all players' hands, so your opponent and yours. If you have one guy left, he's got 5 cards in hand, and you got 5 cards in hand, you still got a 10-10 creature with Shroud. That's pretty good. I mean, obviously it's massive and it can't be targeted. There's your upsides to being a Voltron commander. I really like this commander with my 10 deck ideas video from last year, where I am talking about the, what did I call it? The Super Voltron idea, which is I put a bunch of stuff in my deck that doesn't target my commander. That's the whole idea. So there is a lot of effects out there that are the global effects. Like obviously you want your commander to have trample. It's okay, we can do that. There are ways to give your commander trample that aren't actually targeting it, right? That's what makes this a more interesting build around, in my opinion. If you want to get around board wipes, that would be the big one here, right? I can't make my commander indestructible, but I can save it from board wipes. There are a few ways to do that. Any effect that says creatures you control have this ability, right? Backgrounds will work there. If there's any backgrounds that fit with your Maltani, that will work because that just gives your commander this ability that is just imbued on them without actually targeting them, right? So this is a pretty good Voltron commander, but you actually can build around the fact that you aren't able to target it. And I think that's what makes it super unique. Also, really fantastic art. One of my favorite arts ever on a legendary creature. Only 453 decks on EDHREC and rank 1469. Give it some more love, you guys. I will end off with Temet, Vizir of Nakdamun. White and a blue human cleric 2/2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature token you control gets +1/+1 to end a turn and can't be blocked this turn. So obviously, very interesting build around here. Also has Embalm, 3 white and a blue. So you can exile this card from your graveyard and create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a white zombie human cleric with no mana cost. Embalm only as a sorcery. And that's a really interesting ability, which of course you can use on your commander. It can use its own ability on itself. You can have your commander die, you can embalm it, and now it's a 2/2 zombie that you can give +1/+1 and make it unblockable. Yeah, okay. You're never going to do that, right? It's not actually your commander, so it won't count as commander damage. The embalm ability, though, is really neat because it gets around commander tax, and you can get into a cycle. And the reason I saved this one for last is because I used to have this deck, and I kind of regret taking it apart. I really love that deck. And of course, this is another commander that, because of the token theme and all the things that we're doing recently in the commander format, has gotten so much better. I'm sure there's an absolute ton of support for this guy in the token theme. Obviously, your commander has basically the win con stapled on it. At least that's the way I used to play the deck. It's a very aggro-y theme, and again, in white and blue colors is a little out of the ordinary, so it's pretty unique there. I used to have a very aggro-y deck, and in fact, one of my favorite games I've ever played was with this deck. I kind of regret taking it apart, but I ended up taking out every single player in that game with my deck. I killed one guy and then I killed another guy single-handedly. Killed everyone in that game. The last guy I was down to actually was playing an Dragon deck, so his deck was really slow. Dragon was pretty new at the time. Maybe made the mistake saving him till last. He got his Dragon out and just started stomping me. He also had his Silumgar Drifting Death out, so every time he was attacking, he was wiping my whole board because all my creatures were relatively small, including my commander. And I had a Supplant Form. One of my favorite plays I've ever done in a commander game. I had Supplant Form in my hand. Of course, my commander died, and this is what's great about the Embalm ability. My commander goes to the graveyard. It already died a couple times, but that's okay. All I need is that ability of at the beginning of combat on your turn, I make a token unblockable. So I just left him in my graveyard. I let my opponent swing at me. I supplant form, putting their commander back into hand. So, of course, I don't have to take that damage. I think I was at like 7 life or something, and I make the token copy of their Dragon, block one of their creatures, take some damage, but it wasn't enough to kill me. Luckily for me, they had a Sylvan Library in play, and they had been paying down their life. You know, people are always greedy with that Sylvan Library. So he was already down to 11 life exactly on my turn. I embalm my commander, put it into play. My Dragon token is now an 11/11 unblockable token that I attack with, and I kill them. One of my greatest victories ever in a commander game, and kind of saddens me that I took this deck apart. It's a great commander. Again, the Embalm ability will get around commander tax after the second time your commander dies. So you'll cast your commander, and if it dies, you probably will let it go back to the command zone, so you can pay 4. And then if it dies again, then you just start letting it go to the graveyard, so you can embalm it, send the actual commander back to the command zone, and use the token copy until it dies, and then you can write. So you basically have your commander tax, sort of. It gets around it. Also, just creating a token with your commander can be interesting. A lot of things you can do there as well. Only 523 decks on EDH Rec, rank 1389. And it is a commander that I think, especially now with all the interesting token creation things that we have, like creating token copies of creatures, all of that. The fact that you can make them unblockable, some really interesting ideas I think you can do with this commander. I think it's super underrated. One of the most underrated commanders in the entire format. There you go, 20 commanders that I think you guys should all take a look at. A lot of these commanders I think have always been underrated, but also a lot of these have gotten better in recent years because of the support. Again, just like I do in these old commanders getting better series, a lot of these commanders have gotten a lot better and should probably get a revisit because of the stuff we've gotten recently. You guys let me know in the comments below if you're going after any of these, or if you are already playing some of these. They're certainly unpopular, but there are some people playing them. So if you are, let me know in the comments below. That is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.